and saying, I am Christ. The only people, the only shot the world gets at getting saved is looking at us and receiving whatever we preach to them. That's it. Okay, Jesus is not going to come here, knock on their doors, and tell them I'm Jesus and any of that stuff. If they don't take it from us, they're not going to go to heaven. Okay, so that being said, I will also give you the big picture about the book, as to give you some explanation as to why they are suffering also in the process. So if we go to verse 9, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, you are a chosen generation, you are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth praises of him who have called you out of darkness unto his marvelous light, which in time past were not a people, but are now a people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Dearly beloved, I beseech you, as strangers, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conversation, your conduct, honest among the Gentiles, that whereas they speak against you as evildoers, that they may by your good works, which they shall see, glorify God in the day of visitation. We're going to talk about what the day of visitation is. So in verse 9, before Peter goes to the next set of instructions, he's letting them know, he's letting the Christians know that, number one, they were also blind like the people that are persecuting them. Okay? And they also have obtained mercy. He reminded them of the past and walking in darkness. But they obtained mercy, and now they are in the light. And if the people that were persecuting them, including Nero, was in the light, they wouldn't be persecuting them also. They are also in darkness. In other words, it doesn't feel good, but you have to give him enough time to get saved. You have to give him enough time to come to the light, just like God gave you enough time to come to the light. And let me go over here and give you the 2 points of the book before we go to the verses. Okay? There are 2 overarching points that Peter is getting at in the book, and that we need to take in. Number 1, people are birthed through pain and discomfort. Okay? Nobody is born, well, there's a few instances where people are born with no labor. That's why they say they go into labor. Okay? So it's going to be, at least it's going to be it's not going to be comfortable at a minimum. Okay? Number 1. So also, people are not born again unless there's some kind of pain in the process. Okay? Well, the number 1 pain, Christ. Christ suffered the pain so we can be born again. Okay? So it wasn't some magical thing free, just a painless operation God performed. Okay? Number 2, God allows persecution. Okay? Because there are people that can only get saved through the pains of other Christians. Okay? So then you ask the question, so why, if God is for us, he wants the best for us, he promised that he would avenge us speedily, okay? Why would God allow that? Again, because the primary reason as to why God left us here, all of us here that are Christians, the primary reason why God left you here, because he wants the best for you, he wants you to be happy, he wants you to be safe, he doesn't want you to be persecuted, hung, and burned at the stake and all that. The primary reason why God left you here after you got saved is for you to win other souls. soul. That's in one avenue or not. Whether you went in the other doctors, whether you are going to the VA Vets Club and you hanging out over there, you telling people about Jesus or whatever it is, if you don't do that, you will end up taking those weird causes. You know how people go like, oh, let's save the planet, let's save the whales. Well, that's because their primary purpose, which is saving souls, they're not doing, then that void is being filled by some other useless cause. Okay? And that's what's going to happen if you don't do your purpose, which is primarily why you left here. So knowing that is primarily why you are left here, okay, it now makes sense as to why there are times God says, hey, this is going to hurt. But if they don't get saved, their end will be worse than the temporary pain and suffering that you will incur in order for them to get saved. And if you look at the big picture, okay, which I'll jump back to that. If you look at the big picture, before I get to the study, Africa got the gospel in the very beginning, okay? Asia got the gospel in the very beginning, and Europe got the gospel in the very beginning, okay? Africa did not take the gospel and convert the world. It stopped there. Asia did not take the gospel and convert the world. It stopped there. When you're looking at the big picture, you're looking back in the big picture back, you're looking, the only continent that took it and convert the world is Europe. And for God to take over Europe, there were that persecution and successive persecutions for the gospel to finally overtake the Roman Empire. And from there, from the Roman Empire, they got to Europe, okay? And then Europe got to America. America then turned around and go all around the world and convert a whole bunch of people. Millions and probably billions of people, okay? Today, probably they say there's like 2 billion Christians worldwide. You know, if you take that number and say, well, not all of them are really saved, it's probably a bunch of millions. But when these people were going through the persecution, they did not see the big picture of how their blood was going to save millions and millions of people in the future. But God did see that because he has the master plan. So in their little world, they're like, I am being persecuted. Why? In God's world, God's like, you're being persecuted. That is allowing me to win Europe, to allow me to win a whole bunch of millions and millions of other people, okay, which we are part of today. So the number one thing is, like I said, first thing is people are birthed through pain. Most people that are saved, there's their mommy's praying for them. In fact, people come to church, people, get saved, and when you reach out to them, okay, it normally will cost you some gas money. That's a sacrifice. You have to go pick them up if they don't have a car. It may cost you a day, like in your case, in our case here, we go sow inside. It may cost you that day where you are going to go play fetch with little junior. Instead, you are witnessing. That's a sacrifice to you. You could be doing all kind of stuff, okay? Somebody, you are crying in the middle of the night, say, I'm about to unalive myself. Somebody drive 200 miles to come see you and talk to you and get saved. That's a sacrifice to them, okay? So the gospel is free, but there's a bunch of sacrificial things. And the person that's praying for you to get saved, they could be taking that time, having dinner with their wife and kids and playing game with little Johnny. Instead, they are on their knees seeking God and wrestling with God. Say, God, they're not saved. You got to save them. God, you got to do this. That's a sacrifice to them. So nobody gets saved. I just like, okay, there's a sacrifice along the way. It's a bunch of sacrifices along the way. And the person who is gone to the city, some people, different preachers that God sent to different cities, they hate the city. Okay? They don't like the weather, they don't like anything about the city. They don't like anything except the people. They endure it for 20 years, and you get saved. and God sent them to the next city. They said, praise God, I'm out of there. Okay? But that was a sacrifice to them. So there's pain and discomfort in the birth of a soul. You got to keep that in your mind. Okay? Now let's go back to the thing. Now it's going to make sense with all the commands he's going to give them, okay? Now to go to 1 Peter chapter 2, okay? You are a chosen generation, and for in time past you are not a people. He tell them about that. And he says, dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers in a program of stand from sinners which war against the soul, having your conversation honest among the Gentiles, whereas they speak evil of you, that they may, by your good works, behold, your good work and glorify God in the day of visitation. All right. So the day of visitation. Peter said, even if you keep your bearing in the persecution, people see how you are acting, they see how you're being a Christian in the face of all of these things, they are going to be able to glorify God, okay, in the day of visitation. They'll be able to glorify God. They look at that, it will prick them to get saved, okay? And sometimes your death might cause 5 other people to get saved, okay? And maybe not. Maybe it might be 1. Who knows, okay? Or maybe 0 for now. Or it starts a chain of events. But the people will be able to look at you, and they'll be able to go in when God is having the big judgment. They'll be able to say, you know what, I got saved because of this person. I saw how they live. I saw how they were persecuted. I said, if they can remain cool and not go off, there has to be something to God. And that pricked them, and they got saved. And then their kids got saved. A whole bunch of people get saved all along the way. And in the day of judgment, they will be able to glorify God. They will be able to say they saw God through so-and-so, through the person they were burning at the Colosseum. Okay? Consequently, in the day of visitation, which is the day of judgment, if you were a bad example, they will be able to say, nah, that won't get them off the hook. But that would be bad for you. And that they will be able to say, I would have done right, but I saw this person that was a Christian. They were in persecution. The things got hot. They started dropping F-bombs. They started flipping the birds to the governor, to the king, and everything else. And so I was like, well, I knew about Jesus, but that kind of, I was not sure. That kind of threw me off. Whatever it is the thing is. If the Christians had misbehaved in that persecution, that, along with the successive persecution, they would not have been able to take over the Roman Empire. Okay? The movement would have died right there because people would be like, well, they did burn Rome. Look how they are acting. They are rioting, they are burning the city, they're doing this, they're doing that. Of course they are guilty. Eradicate them. There's no sympathy for them. These people are a pestilent people that are trying to cause disruption to our peaceful order. That's what would have happened to the Christians, and then God would have to probably take another 1,000 years to raise whoever he's going to raise to do it or whatever. But in Revelation chapter 20, verse 12 to 15, okay? 12 to 15. So I'm going to give you that scripture to see why God would allow you to suffer for the sake of somebody else. Just in case you're going like, well, I didn't sign up for this. I just want God to bless my life. Why should I suffer? Okay, well, I'm not sure why you should not see it like that, okay? Which is why he, not say Paul, but if I say Paul, just know it's Peter. Which is why Peter also remind them before he's getting ready to give him the next set of instructions, which verse 13 to 25, which seemingly doesn't seem like it would be because they are supposed to be Christian free and being protected by God. Why was God allowing that to happen to them? But let me tell you why. In Revelation 20, verse 12 to 15, it says, and I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. And the books were open. And another book was open, which is the book of life. The dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. Okay? And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every man according to their works. Death and hell was cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. Verse 15. And whosoever was not found in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. This is why God allows you to have a little discomfort, because that's where they are going. Okay? That's why God allows you to have a little bit of discomfort for them to get saved. If your discomfort gets somebody out of, put it like this, if you are here knowing this is going to happen, that there's going to be eternal hell, damnation, everything. If God came to you today and said, hey, I guarantee you I will save your son, your daughter, your mother, your cousin, or whoever, but I need you to go to prison for 40 years, would you do it? Would you say, well, I kind of like my life the way it is. I don't want, God, I had my career. I want to be an engineer. I want to be this. And, hey, you know what? You'll just have to do it. Would you say that? If God came to you and said, hey, you're going to go to prison for 40 years. You're not going to have your career like you planned. You're not going to have all your dreams and aspirations you wanted to. You're not going to be able to do it. But if you do that, I'll get 10 people or whatever out of your life, in your kids, mother, whatever. Would you say, oh, God, I would take that deal? Me personally, if you promise my sons will go, I was like, oh, yeah, God, I'll do 40 years in a heartbeat. Okay? Because, but look at it this way. If God then came to you as his child and said, hey, it's going to be quick. Nero's going to put you in the Colosseum. They're going to off with your head. But 5 people are going to go to heaven that would have not have gone to heaven. Would you say yes? That's a question you have to answer. Okay? But, so you got to think about that. So now we go to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13, okay, to further down. So let's go there to verse 13. So I got to give you the big picture, which, big picture, okay. Well, before I go to those, okay, remember up in verse 9, he said you are a holy priesthood. You are a priesthood. What does a priest do? A priest, okay, based on the definition, is a religious leader authorized to perform a sacred ritual of a religion, especially as a mediatory agent between humans and one of the more deities among the gods. Or in our world, it's a person who mediate for the ungodly to God. That's what they do. God said, you are a priest. So as you go into the tribulation, God is saying, pray for them to get saved. You're doing your priestly duty now. He just said you are a holy priest. So now you are doing your priestly duties. You are praying, God, save them. God doing this or whatever, because you got 5 minutes anyway, they're going to off with your head. So there's no point of lying, cheating, trying to get out of it. Just go over there with honor, man. Just be like, hey, I'll stand, and just go forth and just be done with it, okay? But that's also, again, it goes to show you your primary job here as a priest is why God left you here, okay? It's not for you to build buildings and make a name for yourself, although you could still do that and still serve God. It's not either. You can have both. You don't have to basically give one of the other. You just got to balance it right. Make sure God is always the priority. So now, let's go to verse 13. Then 1 Peter 2:13, it says, submit yourselves in light of all of these things. Now Peter says, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it is to the king as supreme, or unto governors, or unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praises of them that do well. That's why he lists the informations in the previous verses. Because now he's telling them now, you have to obey the government that is persecuting. They're putting rules on your life. Peter says you need to comply with that. Okay? You need to comply with that for the Lord's sake. Not because the government is right. Not because you're not free. You're supposed to be a free child of God. Why do you have to listen to man? Okay? Not because they are right. Not because the government is holy or anything like that. But you're doing it for God's sake so you can keep a good example to the world. That's why you're doing it. You're taking an L. Okay? You're not There's nothing joyous about the laws that they're going to put on you, but you're doing it to be able to win the world. Okay? For the Lord's sake, I is supreme. And so now there is a time for you to protest. There is a time for you to protest. In America, it's in our Constitution, it's in our laws. We can protest if we don't like something the government is doing. So we want to keep it that way. If you let the Chicoms take over and they take it out, we have a new constitution, you might not be able to protest. Then you have to like it or lump it. So in America, you can protest if you don't like a law and petition your people to change it. So we want to keep it that way. But if the government gives you a dictate that is contrary to God, then you don't have to comply with that. Now, there will be consequences for you not complying with that. Okay? You also have to take the lick that comes with it. I'll give you scriptures for that. Because by that, if you say, well, the government says we can now steal. The government says we can just, like the government says we can now kill. We can do all of this stuff. It's like, no, we got to do it. It's like, no. Nobody can make you sin, whether it's government, friends, or whoever. Nobody can tell you, you must sin. And you say, well, it's the law. The law says I must sin, so I'm going to do it. Okay? God's going to still hold you accountable. So in Acts chapter 5, verse 28 to 29, we see an example where they give him the government gave them a command not to preach the gospel. Peter says, we can't comply with that one. Okay? Says, then Peter and the apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. He said, we're going to have to obey God on this one. Now, Peter and the other apostles did get put in jail. They did end up getting executed. So your future's not looking very bright. But you got to obey the scripture when it comes to government or God. Okay? Now, if it doesn't interfere with God, whatever, just obey their ordinance and things like that. And you got to use wisdom. Okay? You got to use wisdom. You're not going to go to the town square and be like, I'll show you I stand for God. I'm not going to obey. It's like you got to use wisdom. Sometimes Paul, when in areas where it was illegal for him to preach, he preached secretly. He does different things, and he still get the word out. Because you have to live to make sure you carry the word out. So you don't want to go into the town square and say, come get me. Okay? You don't want to do that. You got to use wisdom. Okay? Live long enough to get a whole bunch of people saved. So, but at the same time, the government can't make you sin, so you have to balance it, and it has to come down to your faith and your conviction with God and says, you know what, this is the hill I'm going to die on. I can't tell you that. I can't say, you must do this, you must do that, because then you say, well, the pastor told me, they told me, I am forced to do that. You have to be like, hey, look, I made my choice with God, and if it comes to that, and they are telling me to deny God because they pass a law or die, then I'm going to take death. That's a decision you have to make for yourself. Okay? Every man has to make that decision whether Christ is worth it. That's what you have to. Is Christ worth what I'm about to do, whatever it is? Okay? Then it also tells us another reason as to why we see in verse 14. It says the government is set up for evildoers, to punish evildoers, and to reward those that do good. If the Christians, amongst other reasons, if the Christians rebel against the government, don't really follow the laws and throw chaos, it's gonna delegitimize the government. Okay? Then the government won't be able to punish evildoers. You'll have chaos. You'll have a situation like you have the purge, where every man is riding his own eyes, they're doing all kind of stuff. Okay? And there won't be any government. The people will be like, well, the Christians are the one that we're following them. They're saying they don't listen to man, they listen to God. They're tearing down, they're burning down Seattle, they have Chaz or Chop, whatever it is. They do all of this stuff, and they say, well, the world don't know any better. If the Christians are doing it, well, let's just go on ahead and do it. So now you have no government, no police, no nothing. And then everybody does whatever they think is right in their own eyes. And I give you an example for that. That is in Judges chapter 19 to chapter 17 to chapter 19. You can read the two chapters. Is Judges 17 to 19, and you will see that exact thing happen. And in chapter 18 of Judges, it says there was no king, there was no central authority, and later on in the chapters, it says the people, okay, there was no authority to put them to shame. The people did what was right in their own eyes. Okay? In that scenario, we saw a brutal SA. Okay? I don't want to say the word, R word, because Facebook might censor me. But SA, you guys know what SA is. S.A. A brutal SA that ended up with a lady being chopped up in pieces, sent all over the empire, because everybody was doing what was right in their own eyes. There was no government to put these people to shame. So then God had the tribes got together, and then they said, there's folly in Israel. This is wrong. This is wrong. And then they went to war and trying to rectify it. But so we don't want to have a situation like that because we are disobeying the government. Even though the government sometimes become the persecutor, God says, hey, order is better than chaos. Okay? Verse 15. 1 Peter 2:15, it says, for so is the will of God, that with well-doing, that's the other reason. So we give you the first reason for Lord's sake. Second reason, for order, because the government is there to punish evildoer, doing good and things like that. Verse 15, it says, this is the will of God, that with well-doing, you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. So they see you following the law enough in the persecution era, and they say, well, these guys are not doing anything. They told us that they burn Rome. I don't see any evidence of them burning Rome. They follow the law, they pay their taxes, they do all this stuff, and so we are supposed to believe that they have this secret thing burning Rome. And that's going to work against whatever narrative the government is seeking to build against the Christians. Because there are people that say, well, I'm not really seeing this evidence of what they're saying they're doing. He says, in doing that, you're going to put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. Okay? And as free, and you are free, not using your liberty for maliciousness, but as the servants of God, honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Verse 18. Okay? This is a subject that you do want to know about, and people do have questions about that sometimes, and we're going to dive into it a little bit. This is, servants, be subject to your master with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the forward. For this is thankworthy, if a man for conscience towards God endure grief, suffering wrongfully. That's it. If, okay, let me go. Okay, for verse 20. For what glory is it what glory is it if you be buffeted for your own faults, that you should take it patiently? But if, and when you do well and suffer for it, you take it patiently, that is acceptable to God. Okay. Now, this is talking about slavery. Tell you about slavery. God hates slavery. Okay? God does not condone slavery. God is against it. And I'm going to give you scriptures. In Exodus chapter 21, verse 16, if you steal a person, as in the case of slavery, you go and steal them and kidnap them and put them to servitude. If he does steal a man and selleth him, if he be found, he shall surely put to death. Okay? So God is not playing around with slavery. However, if the government that's supposed to put the person to death is the one that sanctioned it, then God has a way of dealing with that, but in an orderly way, as in the case of Moses. He brings in a deliverer. There's an order for God to unshackle you with a burden. God does not want you to start burning farms. Everybody's burning farms because they're upset. Okay? God has a way. God doesn't like it. Okay? The government is supposed to be the one protecting to make sure it doesn't happen, but they are the one that's committing the crime against you. Now God is going to deal with the government on a governmental level, which is above your level, my level. And in our case, then you had different people, different leaders, MLK, different ones that had peaceful protests and, and God worked it out. So God is not for that, but it says you are suffering wrongfully. So you're being enslaved, and God says, do what the master say, okay? But you're not doing that because God is forced slavery. God said, oh, you must be a good Christian. God is saying, you're actually suffering wrongfully. But it is for the greater good of getting people to heaven. That's why you are doing it. Which is why you should fight for your country to make sure you never get taken over. Because if you get taken over, that's where you're going to be. So we don't want to be there, so you're going to fight while you're alive to make sure your children don't start speaking German or Chinese or something in some concentration camp somewhere. Okay? Which, if they get there and they get saved, they would have to deal with something like that. So God is not for that. However, God is for servitude that is right and holy, meaning you give your service and you get paid. That is right and holy. If you look around, everything in the world is about service. You just happen to get paid. That slavery, they just take you and they force you and say, you're going to do this, you're going to clean the house, you're not going to get paid. If you don't do it, we're going to beat you. Okay? The servitude God is for is you tell the person, hey, I'm going to put you in the house to clean the house, and then I'm going to pay you a just wage for that. And the person says, yes, I will enter into this servitude for 8 hours a day. Okay? And then you pay me this much or whatever you agree with. And that is found in Colossians chapter 3, verse 22. Colossians 3:22. Servant, that's the good servant, and the bad one. That's your equivalent of an employer-employee relationship. I said, servant, obey your master in all things according to the flesh, not with eye service. Don't pretend like you're working. Don't take a broom when big son walk into the room. Actually, really be working. With as many places, but in singleness of not fearing God, saying, you know, you're doing that work, you're doing it for God, okay? And whatsoever you do it heartily as unto the Lord, not unto men. That's okay. Next one. Knowing that of the Lord you shall receive reward of your inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Okay. But he that doeth evil shall receive the wrong which he shall do. There is no instruction person with God. Okay. Next one. Okay. Now, this is the instruction to the employers or the masters, because in those days there was no factories. There was boss and servant. And then the servant comes and say, hey, I'll go work on your farm, but I need 10 sheep a year. Say, all right, sounds like a plan. I go work all day, I get 10 sheep a year, and then eventually I go build my farm. So that was the master and the servant. Okay? But to the master, it says, give them, pay them what is just and equal, knowing that you have a master in heaven also. So that's what God supports. Okay? The slave in Peter chapter 2, God does not support. And God clearly says you are suffering wrongfully. So don't go around and say God supports slavery, Jim Crow 3.0, and start taking people. See, the Bible says, slave obey your master. It's like, no, God does not support that. God does support you paying people the right wage to do the thing. Now, if you look around, every job we do is service. Even the government workers. You know those government workers that we are jealous of? They don't do anything, right? They do 2 hours of work and they get 10 hours of pay. Even those guys are supposed to be serving the people. They are public servants. That's actually their title, public servants. Okay? You go to McDonald's, what happened? You drive to the drive-thru. What is that person doing at McDonald's? They are serving you food. Okay? Every company is serving a section of the population, a segment. Okay? A government contract is serving the government. Everybody is serving. So everybody is in some kind of servant and boss relationship. Okay? Even technically, the president is supposed to serve us. And if he doesn't serve us, we kick him out of office in the 4 years. Okay? So everybody is serving. Okay? So there's nothing wrong with serving. You just got to get paid. That's all. I don't mind. Just got to pay. You look at the NFL. You know, they just running ragged. I mean, these guys, they'll have broken bones. They'll send them back in the field. Okay? But they're getting paid millions of dollars. They're not complaining. Do you see them complaining? Say, slavery is wrong? No, they're getting paid. But if they were not getting paid, oh yeah, it'd be all over the news. So God is not against you working hard in the field, whatever, in the rain and all this stuff, providing that you agree and you're getting a good wage for that. that you deem that's good. If you don't like it, just quit and go somewhere else. Okay? So, so God is not for that, he is for real work. So it says, go back to 1 Peter chapter 2. It says, serve for gentle. It says, for it is thankworthy if a man for conscience toward God endure grief. So you are enduring grief when doing that, and you are suffering wrongfully. That's what's happening. You're not suffering righteously. And if you have your way to escape, if they change the law, by all means escape. If you have a chance to go to another whatever, not to be a slave, don't say, well, the Bible tells me obey. It's like, no, I'm going to be free, okay? So, it says, if you take it personally, that is acceptable to God. And verse 21, which we'll end here, it says, for hereunto you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow in his steps, okay? Now, this suffering, think about that, right? Which tie, before we get to verse 21, I'll go back. All this suffering, you being beat as a slave. You have to comply with the stupid government mandates, okay, which is not convenient for you. You are suffering wrongfully. And in their case, some of them are getting sent to the Colosseum to be burned like a torch, okay? All of this, if there was not a greater purpose, God would not allow his children to go through all of that. God would not tell you, hey, go serve this guy that's whipping you, sending you in the field for the next 15 years for no apparent reason. Okay, except that combined with all of the commandments and everything that is happening in 1 Peter is going to be used for a greater good. In the case of God, big picture, millions of people will be saved. Okay? That's why he said take the L temporarily. But then in verse 21 it says that Christ suffered, leaving us an example that you should follow in his steps. Okay? If you notice in their sufferings and everything that we are doing, the apostles, everybody, they are always saying, look at Jesus. You suffering, look. Problem with authority, you have a problem with humility. The Bible says, look at Jesus. He humbled himself unto death. Okay? You have a problem with suffering. It says, look at Jesus. He suffered. Okay? You are going through a season of joy. Look at Jesus for the joy that was set before him. Every scenario you're going through in your life, you can always identify with Jesus. You're going through betrayal, look at Jesus. Everything that you're going through in your life, good or bad, you can always associate with Jesus. And having that kinship allows you to go through whatever it is that you're going through in this life. Okay? Now, the world does not have that. They're going through it all by themselves. They're only wondering why. Okay? For us, we can say, hey, you know what? This doesn't feel good. Nero's on my back. All these things are happening. But look at Jesus. He didn't do anything wrong. Look how he suffered. Okay? I can relate to that. I can have that bond and say, hey, you know what? One day my suffering will be over. This is for the greater good. Just like Jesus, he suffered for the good that was going to come out of it. What was that good? Us, that we're going to get saved. Okay? So you think about that, and you start thinking about where you are at in your life. Okay? You can always find a Jesus example to tie yourself to, which tells us, okay? Let's finish this. We're going to talk about Jesus the next time, but let's finish this. Okay? It says, you should follow in his steps. Because what were these steps? Say, you follow this, you look at Jesus, he suffered, he left us an example. As you are suffering, look at his example, okay? He was also abused, he was also do all of this stuff that happened to him, and he didn't do anything wrong, and you guys didn't do anything wrong, but he was going through it for the suffering of the world, okay? But also he said, Jesus, follow his steps, if you look at the 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21, okay? And I want to read that, and then verse 24, and then we'll keep it there. And and then we'll cap it here. Okay. Say, for hereunto you are called, because Christ also suffered for us. Okay? They are suffering not for themselves, they are suffering for others also. Leaving us an example that we should follow in his steps. You see the colon there. So now he's going to list what these steps were. Step 1, who did no sin. First step. Following his step, who did no sin. Step 2, there was no guile found in his mouth. So let you also do no sin, let you also have no guile. Step 3, who he was reviled, he reviled not again. Okay? When he suffered, he threatened not again, which is what's happening to them. But he committed himself to him that judged righteously. Okay? Step 3. Step 4 at this point. Who, verse 24, his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree, that we being dead to sins should live unto righteousness, by whose stripe you were healed. Okay? And you were as sheep going astray, now you have returned unto the bishop of your souls. And he said, look at what the suffering of Jesus brought about. He brought you back to God, and you were healed. You got divine healing because of the stripe, because of what happened to them. Think about how many people will get saved, and if you have to suffer persecution that God allows. Okay? So let us end it right here. We are going to be talking about Jesus, the examples of Christ, next week. Good Reverend, won't you go ahead and dismiss us in prayer?